Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Sleepless in Seattle, starring Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, Ross Mellinger, Rita Wilson, Bill Pullman, Victor Garber, and Rosie O'Donnell, directed by Nora Ephron. This is a first for me because I never reviewed Nora Ephron's films, and I've seen maybe a few of them in my life, and I haven't seen this movie in forever. So let's see if it's as good as I remember. Let's get into it. In Chicago, we meet Sam Baldwin, played by Tom Hanks, and his son Jonah, played by Ross Mellinger, buying Sam's wife, aka Jonah's mother, burying their wife slash mother, and Sam is handed a psychiatrist's number as Sam goes through this roughly as he wants to stay in Chicago, but decides to go to Seattle to live there, while Greg, played by Victor Garber, and his wife Susie, played by Tom Hanks' real-life Rita Wilson, goes with them which is a tragic opener, and we get opening credits rolling, and we get to Baltimore 18 months later, and we meet Annie Reed, played by Meg Ryan, and her fiance Walter, played by Bill Pullman, and he meets her family, and I really like the characters, and director Nora Ephron does a good job at introducing the characters as who they are. Annie tries on her grandmother's wedding dress with her mother, as she's engaged to Walter, with her mother Barbara, until she accidentally tears part of the dress, and it's Christmas time. As she drives home in Baltimore, and the acting is pretty good, as Annie hears Jonah on the radio, and she hears about his father's Christmas wish, well, his Christmas wish, and I mean Jonah's Christmas wish. But anyways, which is for his father to have a wife, and he's worried about how sad his father is. And Jonah gets Sam on the phone, and he doesn't sleep. And Sam explains how much of a mother figure Jonah wants as Annie hears it on the radio, called Sleepless in Seattle. Sound familiar? And she picks up some food, and we continue hearing the radio, and Annie feels bad for Sam, as does some women calling on the radio, also feeling bad for the poor guy. And I like the radio scene as Sam says some lovely dialogue about how much he loved his wife when she was alive. And as for the writing, it works for a romance movie, which we don't get too many of those anymore. Annie is at work along with her boss Becky, played by Rosie O'Donnell, talking about how romantic the show was, and they have a pleasant lunch together, and we move on to a New Year's party with Annie and Walter dancing with one another as Sam and Jonah also watch, and Sam puts Jonah to bed for now, and I get the impression Sam is a loving father as Jonah as they say Happy New Year to each other, and I like their scenes as father and son as well. Sam dreams of his wife Maggie as the next day comes, and Sam goes to work with some people who heard him on the radio, and he gets a ton of mail from the mailman thanks to the radio station Sleepless in Seattle, like I brought up before. And Sam tells Jonah how love works while Annie sleeps with Walter, and he snores, which keeps her awake, and Walter snores, I'll say. And she hears the radio and hears Sam's voice again, as in her ears he sounds romantic, and the acting is well done. Sam looks for Jonah and sees he has a friend over that's a girl named Jessica, which seems kind of odd for a boy whom I'm led to believe is 8 years old. And Sam calls a woman to get a drink but she insists on having dinner with him, while Annie writes a letter to Sleepless in Seattle, which will go to Sam, as she wants to meet him, and she's somewhere in Seattle, while she watches an old romance movie. I forget the name, but it's something with Cary Grant, with Becky, and the cinematography is great to look at in this movie. Jonah has a dream about his mother Maggie and Sam coming to him and cheers him up, and Sam goes outside and thinks for a little bit, and this scene is sweet to watch, as Annie makes a call to find Sam and Jonah in Seattle, and she writes a letter to Sam before he goes out to dinner with another woman named Victoria, as Jonah wants to go to New York City on the Empire State Building to meet Annie on Valentine's Day while on the date with Victoria, while she has a terrible laugh, and Jonah tries to break them up, which is something any kid can go through, and I like how realistic that is, as it still happens to this day while Jonah wants Sam to see Annie, and I really like these scenes. Jonah scares Sam and Victoria as Jonah calls the radio station again, while Walter scares Annie and she listens to the radio, and we move on to the next day as Annie flies to Seattle while Sam explains to Jonah why he's in love with Victoria, and she sees Annie getting off a plane at the airport, and Annie looks for Sam and comes by his house, but he's not home, and she finds him at a lake as she can't talk to him yet, which is sweet but unfortunately kind of creepy. Annie tries to talk with him until she sees Victoria, and Annie almost gets killed twice while in the middle of the street as she gets humiliated and tells Becky about it, and she believes her life was over, while Sam sees her and tries to talk to her, but she ran off rather quickly as he tells Greg and Susie about it. And I like these scenes for the great acting by Tom Hanks, Rita Wilson, and Victor Garber. Jessica gets Jonah a ticket to New York as Annie leaves for New York, as well as meet with Walter, and he gives her his mother's wedding ring, while Jonah is upset with his father is going on a trip with Victoria and have a bad conversation. Meanwhile, Jonah leaves in the middle of the night, off screen by the way, and Sam is upset and worried to death while Jonah is on the way to New York to meet Annie at the Empire State Building in New York. While she's there and with Walter, and Sam is on the plane to New York, and he arrives there to get to the Empire State Building while Annie confesses to Walter about wanting to meet Sam while they were dating. And Walter and Annie decide they don't deserve each other in the calmest conversation I've ever seen in a movie. And they see a heart as a sign, and she leaves to go to the Empire State Building while Sam and Jonah reunite there. And Annie runs there and goes up there, and Sam and Jonah go back down, and Annie sees the top of the building while empty, and Jonah forgot his backpack, and they bump into Annie and meet for the first time, and they fall in love instantly. And the climax was cute, as we don't get any more romance movies like this, which is really sad in my opinion. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 7.9 out of 10. I really like the characters as who they are, and director Nora Ephron does a good job at making these actors the characters they're playing, as the acting is well done. And the writing works great for a romance movie, which we don't get too many of those anymore. And the actors have chemistry, with each other, as it works terrifically in my opinion. The cinematography is great, as I've been to Seattle before in my life, and Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, and Nora Ephron did reteam again 5 years later in You've Got Mail, which I haven't seen in a very long time, but I don't remember it being too much. I don't remember too much from that movie except for the ending and the competition against each other. And honestly, I remember that movie being good, but not as good as this movie in my opinion. There were a lot of scenes I like in this movie, and at the end of the day, I like the movie, and this is a recommendation as a romance movie, and we don't get those anymore, and which is very sad, but I really enjoyed this movie from start to finish. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with for those of you that have classical taste, you're in for a treat. I'm going to be back with The Bridge on the River Kwai next time, and until then, let's go to sleep.